We received a message on the evening of October 12th, 2016, the kind of message that doesn't look like much when you first see it, but later becomes the turning point you can never forget. It came through a group email list used by local hikers in North Carolina, just a few lines long, written by a man named Peter Caldwell, who claimed to have stumbled upon something strange and unsettling near Grandfather Mountain, one of the most rugged peaks in the Blue Ridge. At first, I thought it was just another hiker's overblown tale meant to stir curiosity, but something about the way he worded it, short, clipped sentences, no dramatic adjectives, almost like he was afraid someone else might read it, got under my skin. He ended with a plea. If anyone is willing to come, meet me at the trailhead by Boone Fork at sunrise. You'll understand when you see it. I wasn't the type to chase ghost stories, but I had grown up hearing whispers about those mountains. My grandfather used to talk about the Watchers on the Ridge, old legends passed down by Cherokee tribes, describing shapes in the mist and voices carried by the wind that weren't human. As kids, we thought he was just trying to scare us into staying close to camp, but I remembered the look in his eyes when he told those stories, like he'd seen something himself. That night, after reading Peter's message 3 or 4 times, I barely slept. I kept thinking of how my grandfather once warned me. The mountain keeps what it wants, and sometimes it lets you walk away just so you'll tell the others. When dawn came, I grabbed my pack and drove toward Grandfather Mountain with a mix of dread and excitement twisting in my stomach. When I arrived at Boone Fork, there were only 3 other people besides Peter. He was older than I expected, maybe mid-50s, wiry and pale, with eyes that didn't seem to focus fully on anyone. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. It's still there, he said quietly, as if the forest itself might overhear him. The others, a young couple from Asheville and a guy in his 30s named Michael, exchanged uneasy glances. No one laughed or joked. We followed Peter onto the trail, and as soon as the trees swallowed us, the world felt different. The air was damp, filled with the heavy scent of moss and earth, and the light came through the branches in strange angles, like the mountain was bending it. After about an hour of climbing, Peter stopped near a clearing where a stream cut through the rocks. Right there, he whispered. At first I saw nothing unusual, just boulders slick with water and the yellow leaves of October. Then I noticed the way the ground looked, sunken, almost like it had caved in, but not naturally. The earth formed a hollow about 10 feet wide, perfectly circular, as if pressed down by something. Inside, the soil was darker, almost black, and not a single leaf lay in it, even though the rest of the forest floor was covered. It felt wrong just looking at it. Michael broke the silence, saying maybe it was an old sinkhole, but his voice didn't carry any conviction. Peter shook his head. It wasn't here 2 days ago. I hike this trail every week. And at night, he stopped, swallowing hard. At night I heard them. No one asked who them was. We didn't need to. The forest around us had gone unnaturally quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your ears. The couple from Asheville moved closer together, and I felt my own pulse quicken. My grandfather's stories came back unbidden, tales of ancient presences in the mountains, protectors or tricksters, no one knew for sure. Some said they lured travelers away from safe paths. Others claimed they left warnings for those who trespassed too far. And here we were, standing on the edge of something that felt exactly like a warning. The longer I stared at that hollow, the more it seemed to breathe, like the soil itself rose and fell in tiny movements. Peter finally broke the spell by urging us to step back. It doesn't like to be watched, he muttered, almost to himself. We returned to the trail, but the image of that black circle burned in my mind. I told myself it was just an odd patch of earth, nothing supernatural about it. But deep down I knew we had stumbled onto something tied to the old legends. I just didn't realize yet how close those legends were to coming alive. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling of the hollow, the way the soil seemed alive, and how Peter's voice had trembled when he spoke of hearing something in the dark. So when he suggested we camp nearby to observe, I reluctantly agreed, though every instinct in me whispered to get back in the car and drive away. We set up our tents in a small clearing not far from the stream, the 5 of us pretending it was just another backwoods camping trip but none of us laughing, none of us telling stories around the fire the way hikers usually do. The couple from Asheville whispered constantly to each other. Michael paced more than he sat, and Peter stared into the trees like he was waiting for something to step out. As the sun sank, the forest changed. The air grew heavier. The light faded faster than it should have for mid-October, and when the last streaks of orange vanished, an unnatural stillness settled in, like even the crickets were holding their breath. Around midnight it began. At first it was faint, almost like the murmur of a distant waterfall, but the closest one was miles away. It grew clearer, distinct enough to tell it was voices, soft, layered, speaking in a rhythm that didn't sound like English or any language I knew. The couple froze, gripping each other's hands, and Michael whispered, "You hear that, right?" Peter nodded slowly without taking his eyes off the tree line. The sound seemed to circle us, drifting from one side of the forest to the other, always close but never visible. I tried to tell myself it was wind funneling strangely through the valleys, but the pattern was too deliberate, the cadence too measured, like a chant. The strangest part was how the ground beneath us began to vibrate, not like an earthquake, but like a low hum rising from deep under the mountain itself. I felt it through my sleeping bag, in my bones, steady and pulsing. Suddenly Peter stood and motioned for us to follow him, his movements sharp and urgent. Against my better judgment, we left the relative safety of camp and followed him back toward the hollow. The forest was darker than I'd ever seen, the moon swallowed by thick clouds. Yet somehow the trail was visible as though faintly illuminated from below. When we reached the clearing, the hollow was no longer just a patch of black soil. It glowed faintly, a deep red shimmer rising like heat from its center. None of us spoke, but we all saw it. The circle was no longer empty. A ring of stones, smooth and perfectly shaped, now lined its edge, and between them the soil pulsed like a slow heartbeat. Michael cursed under his breath. The couple began to back away, but Peter stepped closer as if in a trance. "Do you see?" he whispered. "They're awake." He knelt near the edge, and for a moment nothing happened. But then the voices surged louder, no longer distant but all around us, echoing from the trees, the ground, the air itself. The hollow flared brighter, and I swear I saw shadows rise from it, long and fluid, shifting like smoke but darker than night. They stretched upward, twisting into shapes that looked almost human but not quite, their edges blurring into the mist that was now spilling across the clearing. The couple screamed and ran back toward the trail, vanishing into the dark, and Michael grabbed my arm, pulling me back too, but Peter remained rooted at the edge, staring into the glowing soil with a look of rapture. We didn't get far before we heard it, the scream. It wasn't Peter's, and it wasn't the couple's. It was something raw and ancient, a sound that froze me where I stood. Michael dragged me further until we collapsed behind a fallen log, both of us shaking. We stayed there for what felt like hours as the chanting ebbed and flowed. The ground trembled, and the shadows twisted above the hollow. When the first gray light of dawn touched the sky, the sounds faded all at once, the glow extinguished as though it had never been there. Michael and I stumbled back to the clearing, but the circle was just dark soil again, the stones gone. No sign of Peter anywhere. The couple didn't return either. The only thing left was the hollow, still too perfect, still too black, still waiting. When the sun finally rose above the ridge that morning, Michael and I stood in silence, staring at the hollow that had swallowed Peter and perhaps the couple too, neither of us able to accept that this place could return to such stillness after the chaos of the night before. The soil lay calm and undisturbed, but the memory of its glow still pulsed in my mind like an afterimage burned into the eyes. Michael wanted to call for help, to alert the park rangers, maybe even the sheriff, but as we started back down the trail, a strange heaviness seemed to follow us, a pressure in the air that grew stronger each time we spoke about what had happened. By the time we reached the trailhead, our words felt muffled, our sentences breaking apart as though the mountain itself didn't want us to speak of it. We waited by our cars until noon, expecting the couple to return, hoping Peter would emerge, but the forest remained quiet and still. Eventually Michael left, shaken and pale, telling me he needed to clear his head, but I stayed. Something in me refused to leave, not until I had answers. I wandered back to the visitor center near Grandfather Mountain State Park, pretending to browse maps until I could get the ranger alone. When I finally asked, as casually as I could, whether anyone had ever reported strange sights near Boone Fork, his eyes flickered in a way that told me he knew more than he wanted to admit. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "People see things up there," he said. "They hear things. We've lost hikers too. But it's not the kind of story you put on brochures." He told me that in 1979, two students from Appalachian State had vanished near the very same trail, their campsite found intact, but no sign of them ever again. Before that, in 1952, a farmer from Banner Elk went missing after following his cows into the woods near the ridge. His footprints stopped abruptly in a clearing not far from the stream, no sign of struggle, just gone. The ranger wouldn't say more, but I could see the fear behind his professional calm. That night, unable to resist, I returned alone to the hollow. It was reckless, I knew, but something compelled me. The circle lay exactly as before, black and empty, but as I stood there, the wind shifted and carried a whisper across the clearing, a single wordless sound that felt both like a warning and an invitation. My grandfather's stories came rushing back, about the watchers on the ridge, guardians or thieves of souls, no one certain which, and I realized that what we had witnessed wasn't new. It was ancient, part of a cycle that long predated us. I didn't step closer. I didn't dare. Instead, I turned and left, feeling the weight of unseen eyes on my back until I reached the road. In the weeks that followed, I searched newspapers, old library records, anything that might connect to the legends. Again and again, I found patterns, disappearances spaced across decades, whispered accounts of glowing soil, chanting voices, figures seen in the mist. Always in the same stretch of mountain, always dismissed as coincidence or folklore. Michael refused to talk to me after that. He moved out of state, claiming he wanted nothing to do with those hills ever again. As for Peter and the couple, no reports were filed, no searches were launched. It was as if they had simply never existed, their absence swallowed by the silence of the mountain. I sometimes wonder if the mountain chooses who remembers and who forgets. The Cherokee spoke of it as a living thing, not just stone and soil, but a presence with will and hunger. My grandfather's warning now echoes in my head every time I think of that hollow. The mountain keeps what it wants. I left that place physically unharmed, but I carry it with me like a shadow, a story I can barely speak without feeling the air grow heavy. I don't know why it let me go when it took the others, but I do know this. The circle is still there, waiting, and someday it will wake again.